Hey everybody, today we're going to be going over how to do some programming in our calculator to help us with our Riemann sums for both our left and right hand Riemann sums. And we're going to be using this template right here, which is going to be posted in Google Classroom along with this video. But I just want to go through the steps and show you guys how to actually program a calculator in case you've never done any sort of programming before. So to start, we'll turn the calculator on. And then we're going to go to program. So we're going to hit that program button, which is right here. Okay. Then we're going to go over to new, and we're going to create a new program and just hit enter. Okay. And we're going to call this program RSUMS. So if you notice, there's an alpha key on. Okay. So it's blinking an A. This allows us to type text into the calculator. So we just have to find the buttons that we need to push. So R, S, U, M, and S. And once we have our program name in, we're going to go ahead and hit enter. Now, by doing this, you've named the program, and then it takes you down to the first line of code. So for our first line of code, we want it to read input, and then in quotation marks, lower limit equals, and then end the quotation marks. So whatever you have inside of these quotation marks is what it's going to display on the calculator. Okay. And then comma A is what that will be stored in. So whatever that input is that you're going to enter into the calculator, that will be stored as your A value once we move into the calculation portion of the code here. Okay. So to find input, okay, since we're already in the program, we're going to hit program again. And then we're going to go over to the I over O, I divided by O, and we'll see that input happens to be our first one. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter there. Okay, and now for the next part, we have a lot of text, right? So lower limit, space, equal sign. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hit second alpha. And what that's going to allow us to do is to lock on that typing only letter spot. So if we look over here at the plus sign, that's our quotation marks. And then we just need to type in lower limit. So find your letters for lower. L, O, W, E, R. And then the 0 key gives you a space. Okay, and then type in limit. L-I-M-I-T. Now, we notice there's an equal sign here. So that is not on any of the alpha keys. So to find the equal sign, what you guys are going to want to do is hit second math, and it'll be the first option here. So we're going to hit enter. And then we're going to have to hit the alpha key again and close the parentheses. So when we go to run this program, and you'll see at the end, it'll say lower limit equals, and that's what it'll display. And from here, we hit comma, and then alpha A to type in our letter A. So that's our first line of code. Okay. Now we're going to repeat that second line of code, input upper limit, and then comma B. So we're going to repeat that process. So program, input, turn on the alpha lock, upper limit, and then when you get to the equal sign, again, second math equals, and then alpha, close the parentheses, comma, alpha, B. Okay, so that's going to be our second line of code. Now, for those of you that have newer calculators than the ones that we have here at the school, your code is just going to continue to read out on one line, and that's okay. If not, it'll just look like this and it'll drop down, but that's not going to be an issue. Okay. And the last one, input rectangles, comma, N. Okay, so we're going to do that. All right. So once we have our three inputs entered in, we're going to drop down to our next line of calculation code. So here, we're going to type in parentheses b minus a divided by n, and then we're going to store that as d. So I'll show you what the store key is when we get there. But we'll start out parenthesis b minus alpha a, close the parenthesis, divided by alpha n. And then the STO button is your store as, that's your arrow. And then we're going to store that calculation as D. Okay. And then for our next line, we're going to do A plus D over 2. Now the calculator will calculate this as the value we have for A plus half of the value we just calculated. And we're going to store that as C. So for this one, A plus alpha D divided by 2, store that as alpha C. Okay. And for the next two, we're going to have 0 stored as L, 0 stored as R, and then 1 stored as I. Okay, so we're going to do all three of those next. So 0 stored as L, 0 stored as R, and 1 stored as I. Okay, we're almost there. Now, for this next one, we're going to have to go back into the programming. It's where we're going to find while, and then we're going to have to go back into the math to find the not equal to or can't equal. So it's going to be while I can't equal n plus 1. Okay, so here we're going to hit program, go over. Oop, don't have to go over for that one. So that one's going to be under the control menu. So we go down to option 5, while, and then alpha I, and then can't equal. That's going to be second math. Go down to the can't equal. And then that's going to be n plus 1. So alpha n plus 1. Okay. And then from here, we'll go on to the next line, and I'll show you guys how to find the y1. Okay, so that's going to be the next tricky one to find. Okay, so it's going to be alpha L plus y1. Now to find y1, you're going to hit the alpha, and then you're going to go up here to the trace, which brings up to your F4. And then you're just going to hit enter, because that's what gets entered into our y1. Okay, so it brings up y1, and then parentheses, alpha A plus alpha I, alpha D, close the parentheses, and we're going to store that as our R value. And then for the next one, excuse me, we're not going to store that as R. I apologize. We're going to store that as our new L value. So we can just, we made a mistake, just hit delete, and then hit alpha L. Okay. Now we're going to repeat R plus Y1 times A plus I times D, and we're going to store that as our new R value. Okay, because right now, before this, R is started at 0. So alpha R plus, and then Y1 again, it's going to be alpha F4, enter, parenthesis, alpha A plus alpha I D, close parentheses, and store that as R. Now, I realize I now have made a mistake for our L value. So I didn't type that in correctly. So if we make a mistake and we catch it, we just go back and fix it. Okay. So if we go back up, we notice that this is supposed to be L plus Y1. And then see if I can get these both in the picture. A plus I minus 1 times D. So we can go ahead and just fix that. So I'll show you a trick to insert. So if we go over to the I, if you hit second delete, you can insert a second set of parentheses, and then we'll just retype it from there. I minus 1, close the parentheses, multiply that by D, close the second set of parentheses, and we're going to store that as alpha L. Okay, so now we have the code right. Okay, go back to the next line, hit enter. And this brings up our second to last line of code for calculations. And that's going to be I plus 1. We're going to store that as I. So alpha I plus 1, store as alpha I. And then you see it says end. Now to find end, that's again under the program. So we're going to hit program. And that's option 7 under the control. So we're going to go down to option 7. We'd enter. And then we have 2 last things to display. Okay, so again, for display, we're going to hit program, go over to the I over O, and option 3, display. And then we're going to do the alpha lock again. So second alpha, parenthesis. And this is going to be our left sum. So let's spell that out. Space SUM. And close the parentheses. And then turn our alpha lock off. And we're going to hit comma. And then that's going to be, we're going to tell it what to display, which is going to be L times D. So alpha L, alpha D. And then our right sum, again, we're going to hit program, go over to I over O, display. And then turn our alpha lock on, parentheses, right sum, RIGHT, space SUM, close. And then we're going to turn off the alpha, comma, and then that's going to be R times D. So alpha R times alpha D. And that's going to be it. So now we have it programmed in. So when we're going to use this is when we're trying to find the area under the curve. So if we go into y equals, we're going to clear out whatever's in there. And I'm just going to show you real quick on how this is going to work. Okay, so if we take the function x squared, okay, so we typed in our function into our y1, and we want to run our Riemann Sums program. We hit enter. If we want to know the area under the curve between, let's say, 1 and 3, then our lower limit is going to be 1. Our upper limit is going to be 3. But then it comes up with this thing called rectangles. And it'll either tell you how many rectangles to put in your homework, or you can calculate it, which we'll go over in the lesson. And it really just depends on how accurate the area is going to be with how many rectangles we use. But let's say we're using, I don't know, 10. So if we calculate 10 rectangles between those two values, it'll tell you your left sum and your right sum. And the difference between the two is quite a bit. But if we increase the number of rectangles, so let's run the program again. Lower limit still 1, upper limit still 3, but let's say we want to run it with, I don't know, 100 rectangles. We should expect to see values of the left and right sums get closer to each other. And it's going to take a little bit longer. The more rectangles you do, the longer it's going to take to calculate. Okay, so if we up that to 1,000, it would take even longer. But if you notice, these two values are closer and closer together. So depending on how accurate the left and right sums are going to be, will depend on either what the question is asking you to get it close to, or it will actually say, calculate it with X number of rectangles. So that's just to give you an idea of how to program your calculator and how we're going to use these moving forward so that we don't have to hand calculate our Riemann sums.